Hello, my friends, and good morning. This is Revolutionary Blackout. I like to call this Thursday Morning Live. Now I know what my friend Dr. Cream Batesh. Hold, let me fix the audio real quick. Now I know what my friends Dr. Cream Batesh and Peter goes through because you guys know we had the International Leftist Coalition live streams we do. If you guys don't know, they're professors out of the University of Hong Kong. So when we do our live streams, we usually do it late in the evening, but it's actually in the morning for them. So I'm actually waking up early in the morning around the same time they usually do. So now I know their pain, and I appreciate you guys sticking in with us. And we got them back again. Kareem and Peter, my good friends from BetB Media. Welcome back. Welcome, Kareem and Peter.
Glad
Hey,
to be
Nick.
here. Glad to be here. Good to see you. Yeah.
And for the first time on Revolutionary Blackout, we have a guest I'm very interested in talking to today. And I want to make sure I get it correct. Make sure you correct me if I get this wrong. But it's Arami, correct? I don't want to
Irony.
irony. I apologize. But welcome to the show. Welcome to Revolutionary Blackout. We're gonna have a good time. Welcome to the show. So the what we usually do on my show, we usually have free form conversations. I love to have Dr. Kareem Batesh. I love to have Peter Beatty on, and we usually talk about honestly complex theory. The same theory that a lot of people want to ban, for example, like critical race theory, which is pretty much just critically thinking about race. Like this is kind of stuff we talk about. At this channel, we're here to make people uncomfortable. We're here to have the uncomfortable conversation that you guys don't want to talk about, and that's why we have Irami on. That's why I had Dr. Kareem Batesh on, Peter Beatty on, to have these conversations to really engage in thought-provoking content. So I want to pass it to Kareem. We can start with a monologue so we can start the conversation here because there are many ideas that we have on coalition building, on the state of the left. So I want to pass it to Kareem so we can kind of get this conversation started because I'm very interested in seeing how this goes. So Kareem, you want to lead with a monologue or anything?
Well, not really a monologue this time, but I invited Irami, right? Irami. I invited Irami on. I've been following you for a couple of years, and what I like about you is that you always have very direct, unapologetic takes on things such as race and feminism and quite courageous, I must say, because sometimes your opinions are quite unorthodox. But in my opinion, that doesn't make them less true, to be very honest. And what I find very interesting, and I think we can start off with that, and I would also be interested in Nick and Peter's input in that sense, is this idea that we see increasingly on the left, and that is the idea that we need coalition building across, you could say, a working class coalition building across racial lines. You could say cross racial working class alliance solidarity, and you even have a segment on the left who says we need to work with right wingers. Okay, so we need coalition building between left wingers and right wing working class people. And you say something very interesting, and that is that you think, and I'm also very critical of that idea that or at least I'm very much in agreement with your critique that it's quite difficult, or if not impossible, to do a cross-racial lines solidarity alliance because it's too hard for white people to give up their privilege in favor of solidarity, working class solidarity across racial lines. I think you say some very, very convincing and interesting stuff. And if you want to maybe tell us a bit how you think about that, and then maybe we can get the conversation rolling.
Good. Yeah. So I've been kind of writing on this for the last few days, trying to get all of the moves right. The general argument that I figured out a while ago was that they're mutually reinforcing institutions that make meaning in people's lives, right? Like you could read philosophers and they'll talk about that. And it's pretty clear that it's not just your identity is not just a matter of where you work. Your identity is also tied up in your religion, tied up in your in your family relations and aspirations for your family. It's tied up in your property ownership. It's tied up in all of these discretionary institutions of freedom, of which work is one, and an important one. Your participation in civil society, but it doesn't have some sort of monopoly over meaning in your life. And this idea that people will give up power in all of their other aspects of their lives in order to join in solidarity with people they have to happen to work for or work with on the shop floor at work, but in other aspects of their life are comfortable ruling over, is a little bit naive, right? So if it were the case that people didn't have identities that were independent of their worker identity, the idea of a that was sustained independently of their worker identity, the idea of a cross-racial coalition would be pretty simple. Cross-racial working class coalition would be pretty simple. But we do have other spheres of activity where we get our meaningful aspects of our lives that are not just the work. And all of those other spheres of activity are predicated on equality of racial hierarchy, at least in the US, especially in the US, well, not just in the US, in general, that we would have to address also. And so when I was thinking about this, what I put together a few days, over the last 2 days, and honestly this morning, so it's a little bit fresh, is that we don't understand the structure of racism because we don't understand that there are properties of people and institutions that are not expressed. We kind of get this with markets, right? We know that the price of a good might not actually express the degradation of the workers who made the good. We kind of get that with iPhones. It's like, well, what an iPhone is what I could use it for as in my life. Well, no, that's only one aspect of what an iPhone is. And that might be the aspect of it. Or what an iPhone is its relationship to other goods that I could get instead, right? And that is one aspect of an iPhone, but that's not all of the aspect. It's all of the aspect of the iPhone can't be expressed in its relationship to Android or its relationship to other things in your life, right? Because you can be pro-worker in your relationship to Android and pro-worker in all of the other aspects of your life, but still buy an iPhone because you never thought of the iPhone as being made up of sweatshop labor in a Wuhan factory, right? So there's a way in which the production is occluded in our conception of the iPhone, and unless you take the production seriously as a part of the functioning of the iPhone, then you can have an account of the functioning of the iPhone through its relationship internal in the marketplace and its relationship to your needs that actually occludes the production. And so that's the story in the iPhone. But what I was working on this morning was actually an intervention. And we might as well just do this because you guys are all smart people. And so, everyone's going to learn things. So Galileo's big intervention in the two sciences, a treatise he wrote back in the 17th century, was that you can't just look at the form and the relationships and the proportions and the relationships between things in their form in order to understand their properties. They have materials have properties independent of their functional relationship. So that's why I can't just make everything in the human body giant 10 times size and have the human body function, because it turns out that the weight of the body won't scale up in the same way as it will with proportion. So you have to actually look at the properties of the material that you want to scale up and not just look at the proportion of the scale and assume that the scale will work. Now this gets confused in Marvel movies because they with Ant-Man, you think that if I just shrink everything the same size, it'll work the same, or if I blow everything up really big, it'll work the same, or in the Jonathan Swift novels, that works the same. But actually the proportions of things don't work that way because materials have properties that don't scale and then are occluded when you just look at their functioning. And so if you don't understand the properties of the material, you actually don't understand how this material, not that material, is going to work in the functioning, and how you can't just scale up and scale down because material properties matter. So what that has to do with how we think about racism is that we don't actually think about the properties of the material independent of the functioning of the institution we want to deal with, right? So we don't actually think of the working class white person as having properties that exist outside of their working class identity, of having independent properties, right? And the working class white person in the United States has properties independent of their working class identity. And we need to actually take those seriously. But we don't take those seriously if you only understand them as working class.
Right.
So
right.
we don't, yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let's do Kareem and then Peter. Let's do it that way.
Sure. No. I was just saying that, and that's what I often also say. I often say that race and class are two different social constructs that indeed interact. And you can say that, which means like you can be low socioeconomic status and black, and of low socioeconomic status and white, which means that it's worse for the black person than for the white person. And you can be of high socioeconomic status and white, and high socioeconomic status and black, and you would see that it's most often better for the white person. So there is an interaction between the two, and they are you could almost say, even though correlated, in a way also independent. And what I think is maybe what you also try to say is that when you take everything together and not just the working class identity, you would say that the wages of whiteness are actually more attractive than to give up the wages of whiteness for cross-race collaboration. Am I right?
Yeah, that's exactly. Like, they're not negligible.
Right.
Right. It's not nothing, right? And yeah, especially when you think about how many people in the United States I see use their money in order to secure racial hierarchy in other aspects of their life, right? So like, they'll get a raise and then use that money to pull their kids out of private school to send them to a segregated white school, right? So like, you're using the money in order to like live in to buy your way into a segregated neighborhood. So you're taking from one sphere of activity and gains that seem to be progressive in one sphere of activity in order to like calcify injustices in another sphere of activity.
So I'm wondering, Irami, like, how would you distinguish, or would you distinguish what you're talking about from the concept of false consciousness? Because I think like false consciousness gets a really bad rap from non-Marxist people, because I find it really funny because they're like, oh, Marxists, they're so paternalistic because they believe in false consciousness and they believe the correct things, and other people have believe the wrong things. I'm like, dude, everyone believes that. Everyone believes that they're right, and other people who are wrong are benighted or less correct than they are, right? But it sounds like what you're saying is similar to what people for over 100 years have been grappling with, that people should be able to think of themselves as workers and see the commonality of their interests and unite on that basis. But that's hard because the original idea was false consciousness, that people have other ways of conceptualizing themselves that hide the reality of their class position, and so they don't think of their class position. So is that kind of like the same thing you're saying, or do you have a very different?
No, I don't think people are confused about their interests in the same way. I don't think like people are, it goes back to, in 1932, they did the survey data on Aryan women in Germany. And they're like, why would these Aryan women in Germany vote for the Nazis, the obviously most patriarchal party in the reign? And the idea was like, well, these women were just confused about their interests. And I'm like, I don't know if they were confused about their interests, because the Catholic women weren't confused about their like. It was just the Protestant women who went for the Nazi party, and like it wasn't a matter of confusion. It's just that their interests were in racism. Like it's not. It's I don't. And so when people look at even like the 53% of white women in the US who voted for Trump might be confused about their interests or have a false consciousness. No, I think they knew what they do. They voted for the guy who they voted for the patriarch, because as much as it sucks that like he's a little bit handsy, they like the perks of patriarchy. Right, so we need to be like.
Funny, you're not talking about Trump or Biden there.
Well, yeah, both. Yeah, I think Biden did it. I think Tara Reid was right. I think Democrats who heard Tara Reid talk about Biden believe Tara Reid too. They just have to pretend that they don't.
Kamala said it. Kamala said she believed in Biden accusers when she was running against them.
Yeah.
And you think the liberal class don't agree with Kamala's statement? But go ahead. I'll pass it back to you.
We were just willing to sacrifice her because, like, you know, Biden was what we wanted, right? So, like, we weren't confused about who Biden is. Biden did it. Like, he grabbed her, he did it, and then he got her fired. He did the whole thing. I have complete faith. I also have complete faith that other people know that they just didn't care. They don't care. I kind of feel bad. I do feel bad about how I thought about Monica Lewinsky 20 years ago, because at the time, like, I thought, well, you know, she had it coming or whatever. Now that I'm older, I feel like that was really gross in lots of ways. But this idea that people are confused about their interests when they vote, I don't think that's what's going on. I especially in terms of gender, and that we assume that, like, women who vote for patriarchs are confused about their interests. I just don't think we're honest about, like, the way gender and interests and work all kind of coincide, like, kind of interact with each other. So, and I don't think white working class people who, when they vote for, like, the racist, not like who's also anti-working class, is confused about their interests. I think that their interests are also with, like, their church. Their interests are with their family. Interests are their aspirations to get their daughter married off to a boss. Their interests are also, like, all of that gets jeopardized when you start, like, having common cause with their interests are in their property holdings or in their uncle's property holdings that might come in inheritance. They have multiple interests that, like, on balance, are not particularly conducive to, like, risking it all for, like, a $4 raise an hour, and a union, right? So, and they feel like Kareem was saying, the wages of whiteness, like what you get from being white in other aspects of your society, aren't something you're going to jeopardize for just a little bit more status at the workplace and a few more dollars an hour, especially when, like I said before, you use those dollars an hour to buy racism in other spheres of activity. You use that raise in order to, like, take your kid out of public school and put them in the Catholic school for the whiteness, right? So you use that raise to move out. So I don't think people are confused about, I just don't think working class identity is primary and authoritative. Oh, yeah. I just think it's one of a melange of different identities through which people use their meaning. And so, and they realize that, like, well, I'll take the lower pay and the degradation at work for, like, the status I get in my family and the status I get at my church and the status I get in, like, property and the legal status and the ability to call cops on Negroes I don't like. I'll take all of that for, like, a $3 an hour pay cut and no union.
Yeah, right. Good point. And what would you say then? So you would say that, I'm of the opinion. I would say that in a society such as the U.S., but also other societies like where I'm from, the Netherlands, where you have literally structural hierarchical differences between racial groups, I think it's just incredibly difficult to get any kind of class collaboration because of these systemic differences, and one group that is above the other group. I just don't see how you get those people to collaborate with a group that is lower on the social ladder in so many other aspects.
Yeah, right? Well, nobody wants to assimilate into a losing team, right? So, like, that's, I mean, I get in trouble when I talk about immigrants into America. Like, my dad was an immigrant. My mom's from, like, was a descendant of slave, and, like, African immigrants don't come to America to assimilate into the losing team. Like, that's just not, like, why would they do that? And, like, you're asking working class white people to assimilate into a team that's not winning right now, in the global or national game, which is, like, the labor movement. And I don't know if they're willing to take that bet. I don't think they are. And it's not irrational for them to ride out their status in other aspects of their life. But I do think there is hope insofar as we change from just assuming that everyone is going to adopt their working class identity to we need to actually go on the offensive and change their identity, like how they think of motherhood, how they think of gender, how they think of Christianity. You go on the cultural offensive to make those other identities consistent with racial justice, right? And so that you take the fight to the education and the school boards, and you take the fight to how we think to the churches and like how those are racialized. You take the fight into all of these other spheres of activities and kind of undermine the racial hierarchy that governs all of those other spheres of activity. And then you've kind of worked the body enough that I think you could do some cross racial working class solidarity, like that's actually can sustain some kind of strain, right?
Right. People need to be educated and organized to think of that category and value their membership in it and rethink the way that they think of their other identities.
The latter thing is the thing that a lot of cultural Marxists don't want to do. We got to get them to rethink their church. You got to get them to rethink what it is to be a woman, to be a man, to be a responsible citizen, rethink what it is to be educated, all of that. And if you do that work, then, we can talk about labor in a way that actually will have uptake. But if you're not willing to go at the cultural institutions that secure meaning in all of their other aspects of their life, and actually respect those other institutions as non-labor institutions, and just say labor is fundamental. It actually might not be fundamental. Like when at my funeral, they might not talk about my factory job. like what I did in my factory job. So there's a way in which meaning in life might not be fundamentally, especially a job where the end is different than the activity of producing it, like a widget factory. It might not be my work at the factory, right? So I think the real offensive for a better labor politics, well, the offensive for a real politics is to start with labor, and then the offensive for a real labor politics is to go invasive on all of these other cultural institutions. We need to change how people think about, religion and gender and all of these other things that sustain bad labor politics. Press.
Yeah, and I would say, and I don't know how you think about that, Irami, that. And of course, the fact that in the old days, the middle class was a kind of gesture from the upper class to you could almost say the white working class to manifest their kind of superiority over other groups of people. But the neoliberal assault on society has been so extreme now that even the white middle class has been pushed into the lower socioeconomic class together with people of color. That actually, even though it sounds cynical, that may even give some hope that you may see a kind of cross-race collaboration because of the severe assault on the white middle class. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think there's real anxiety, right? So what are you going to do about middle class anxiety when the middle class identity in America was almost it's explicitly defined by distance from Black poverty? That's from the FDR and the New Deal, where all of the programs are racialized so that you were incentivized to distance yourself from Black people in order to attain middle class status, right? So if you don't know, the watchers who don't know, the unemployment insurance, the GI Bill, and the FHA loans were all premised on you segregating. So what we think of as the programs that created the middle class also created the ghetto, because they are what concentrated poverty in the inner cities and excluded Black people from buying houses in the suburbs, right? So you would only get an FHA loan if you lived in a non-Black neighborhood that was explicitly non-Black, right? So those, and that's the deal that Roosevelt cut with the Southern Democrats in order to get the votes for the FHA and for all the alphabet programs and the support for the for a lot of New Deal programs. Same with unemployment insurance. It had to not include farm workers and domestic workers because that was 75% of the Black labor force, right? So like we were going to give unemployment, but only to white people, right? And that was the deal that was cut. So the middle class identity is premised on distance from and power over, functionally. You get to have a Black maid too. It wasn't made for the Black maid, right? It was distance from and power over, the racialized others, right? And so now that's an anxious place to be, right? Because they're looking at themselves fall. They're looking at themselves fall, and I don't know what they're going to do with that anxiety. I don't know, because the anxiety was always premised on a kind of evil. So like I don't know how they're going to process it. If it's going to be, because in order for them to attain the status and the quality of life to which they thought they would become accustomed, they're going to have to like figure out a way to either like revolutionize our system or like reproduce racial hierarchy to get their white suburbs back. Nice that they can afford, right? So like I don't know what the response is going to be, but the anxiety is going to be the problem of living, the anxiety of losing the aspired way of life that was already a little bit racially unjust, and not a little bit, like not negligibly. That included ignoring racial justice. So,
yeah, we already have a pretty unfortunate and kind of terrifying historical example of what happens when a lot of people become, precaritized, or their economic situation gets a hell of a lot worse. For all of the talk among liberal circles about Trump and fascism, it's like everyone seems to skip over the conditions that allowed fascism to become so popular as a solution, as an alternative to the utter failure of liberalism, like liberal economics. And it's like it's staring us right in the face, and yet there's all this talk, blah blah blah, about fascism on the rise, but nobody's pointing out the similarity in economic circumstances that did it the last time.
Yeah, and like when you look at Biden, like when I think about just Biden and Weimar, and like just like I did, like people are anxious about inflation. They don't think he's competent. They don't think he's serious. Like that means someone who's competent and serious, all they have to do is promise that like, I'm going to get your prices down and I'm going to give you stability in your life. And like, I like Biden seems like the worst possible. I didn't think it'd be worse than Obama or Clinton, but like Biden seemed like the worst possible figure to fight the quality of anxiety that is emerging in America, just because like he just kind of thinks that like it'll be okay. That's what I see. And I think someone else who's like going to be a real fighter is gonna be very popular. Someone who says like, you're in pain, we need to get your prices down, and it's their fault, and I'm going to get you back to the status and the quality of living to which you have been groomed and should be groomed to become accustomed to. Like that person, I think, does better.
Yeah, especially if they do what they did last time, which is copy some socialist economic ideas and then marry it to like an extremely violent, aggressive position towards outgroups. So,
yeah, that's something you see everywhere. That's something you literally see everywhere. So this whole idea, always what you hear, that during economic anxious times, people become more right wing and fascist. And well, actually, the whole choice of fascism is a product of the system itself, of course, to save itself from any kind of breakdown. And leftists, people on the socialist leftist side, are of course a bigger threat to the system than fascism. So this is, you can say that this is a conscious decision to prop up fascism, and that's what you always see,
Yeah. And so, I mean, the middle road is untenable. The left road is hard, and the right road is familiar. Like literally familiar. Like it's like the right road is like the blood. Like so, like that's the middle. But people don't know that the middle road is untenable. But Biden is the middle road, and I don't think like I don't think that kind of ideology makes it past another election cycle. Or like I think, yeah, I think it's untenable. Some like dyed-in-wool neoliberals will say maybe we just need another Biden, a younger version. But I think it's like, I think people look at their gas prices, they look at their like the prices for things and their productive power, and they want someone serious who's going to empower them in these aspects of their life. And Biden's not serious about that. So
yeah, there's a lot of great discussion that you especially bring up in regards on in building coalitions on who are actually serious allies. And I actually push back against the mainstream. I would call it the liberal consensus on coalition building, class building. Like, and I put back a lot of people that on the mainstream progressive left as well. These same people believe that we should build coalitions with these Biden bros who are the antithesis of everything we stand for. And we talk about the crime bill. We talk about how Joe Biden escalated every single policy of Donald Trump. So I 100% understand your unwillingness to work with these people who are unserious to the point where they want to prop up someone who is building the white supremacist institutions that we are supposed to be fighting against. That makes sense to me, because there are a lot of people who don't understand exactly where our allies are at. But what my approach is, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, because I love a lot of what you're saying. It's a kind of a different approach, and I just want to hear your thoughts, because my strategy on fighting against the racist institutions and the struggles that go against our community is building class-based coalitions. And when I say class, we have done panels on the International Leftists where me and Kareem, we accurately explain that as far as I'm concerned, class is race. Class is inherently tied to your race. And this is shown in the American way of life and the fact that our wealth right now is worse than it was during the Jim Crow era. That is because you have the police that siphons our wealth. You have Wall Street that steals our money through illegal means, through fraudulent contracts that was exposed that Eric Holder chose not to prosecute against. So it's a systematic attack on the wealth of not only Black Americans, but Indigenous Americans, Latino Americans as well. So I use that to connect the class issue. So if you're a member of the white working class and you want to challenge, if you want to challenge Big Pharma, if you want to challenge the police state, I don't want to welcome you as an ally. I want to welcome you on an ally because we are challenging systems that oppresses us. That's why I say build class-based coalitions, while at the same time, what differentiates me from a lot of the liberal consistence is I do not accept the idea that Democrats are that ally. Because I explained how, for example, just one example, the police state siphons our wealth. And if you're a right-winger, if you're a quote-unquote right-wing populist and you support the police state, you are not as class conscious as you think you are. If you don't support reparations, you are not class conscious as you think you are. If you don't support destroying the state that wages class war against us, if you don't support ending the military-industrial complex, you are not class conscious. You are not anti-racist. You have no business being in coalition with us. But at the same time, if you are a white ally and you're working towards those things, I think it is a good idea to build coalitions with them and educate them along the way to help them improve to be allies. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, because I love what you had to say, but I think we had two different approaches. But I just want to get your take on that in general.
Yeah. All right. So one of the problems with white populism is that we assume that all of these mutually reinforcing institutions that make up meaning in a person's life can sustain economic justice with Black people, right? So you're asking, like I said, you're asking white people to jeopardize what they understand their religion to be, what they understand their gender to be, what they understand their relationship to property to be, what they understand their relationship to police to be. You're asking them to jeopardize all of that for the sake of class, broadly construed. And like that takes a lot of ideological work, and not because those other things are not meaningful. It's just that they just happen to have those iterations of them wrong. And so we need to keep the family and keep all of those things, keep property. I'm a fan of private property. I'm a fan of nuclear families. I'm a fan of all of these things, just not in their current iterations. They need to be made in a way that mutually reinforces, like, working class, respect and ideals and racial justice. But right now, putting in a class conscious heart into a human heart into the body of a pig isn't going to work, right? And all of the other organs of the pig have been organized in order to sustain the pig as a pig. And you're trying to do a heart transplant and are surprised when it doesn't take. Right? Like the other organs, the church, all of these other organs are going to reject the the transplant, right? So you need to actually reform the other organs, and we have to understand that the other organs are mutually exclusive and will fight and reject the class, like the class even broadly construed plan. So like we like that's what's at stake. There's one section I just read few days ago on working class white women during desegregation, and this book Massive Resistance and Southern Womanhood, and it goes against like the way women in the South use their gender in order to fight desegregation. And she's like, this would look different at the elite level and at the working class level, because working class white women also used their womanhood to fight desegregation. It just they could hold two ideas in their head at the same time. They could both hate the elites who like was screwing up their life. They could both resent the heck out of the elites who were screwing up their life, and preached desegregation from their wealthy enclaves and would poo-poo them because like the elites, the white elites, like wanted to be woke and preach desegregation while they had private schools that were all white anyway. And so the working class women hated them for that. But also still you can hate the elites and also not want to share power with black people. You can do two things at one time. You can hate the white elite and still not want to share power with black people and like fight from that. And that's like a plurality of Trump's base who hate the elites and don't want to share power with black people. And like, these are not two, those ideas are not mutually exclusive. That's actually, you can have a steady state of people. And I think that's the January 6th people who hate elites, don't want to share power with black people. Hate elites, don't want to share power with black people. Hate Pelosi, hate even right-wing elites, don't want to share power with black people. And that's like a huge, we like to pretend that segment doesn't exist. Meanwhile, it's like a plurality of like national sentiment, like all across the world.
Right. And I noticed that is an international thing you see across the West. When you see the debate in my country, it's always about people who are economically anxious, and it's about people are worried about the rent and the price of healthcare. That's the kind of mainstream debate you see, but it's never about the fact that a lot of people are just racist. And it's painful to say that. I understand that societies don't want to admit it, but it's deeply embedded into our culture. So in a way, you cannot even blame the people. But that is a huge motivation, I would say. And I like what you say, Irami, about the fact that even if you want to, if you dream about a cross-racial collaboration in the working class, you are actually asking then to break down a racial system that is embedded in pretty much all institutions. So you if you want to do that, and if you successfully want to do that, you're saying the only solution is to break down the complete society, religion, the legal system, everything. So my question is then to you, and I agree with Nick. I think I also think that we need allies from all racial groups, including whites. I mean, I'm half white, and I would consider my white family allies. But on the other hand, would you then say that if people consider them white allies, would you say that the majority of them just doesn't realize or aren't aware yet what they are giving up by being an ally?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of allies who are allies right up until it comes to jeopardizing their granddad's inheritance. Then like right up until like, but like I didn't expect to like, I still want to be able, I don't want to tick off my mom, or like, but I don't want to like tick off like, I don't want to make Mima upset. Like I'm an ally, but like I'm always amused by white people who are allies, and they won't even jeopardize a friendship with white people they don't even like.
Right, yeah.
You're an ally, but you won't take that kind of stress. You won't even jeopardize a friendship with another white person you don't even like, because maybe down the road that institution, like you're gonna need them for something, and so like it's always at that point in time, it's just like, just write a check and shut up. And by the way, if anybody likes what I say, you can go over to www.funkyacademic.com, watch a few videos, and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month and keep me saying it.
Yeah, support them. Make sure you guys support BetBeat too. Kareem and Peter. They do great, like hardcore, deeply serious analysis over events like you don't see on a lot of channels. That's why we bring them on here. That's what we want to do here. We want to prop up as many serious thinkers as possible. And I want to quickly chime in here, because what we are talking about is exactly why I did my segment on right-wing populism. I actually got something in Substack I want to write about this, because people ask me, why don't you have right-wing populists on your show? Because I'm an advocate of the working class uniting. And I also push back strongly against the entire Republican Party, you talk about this as well, is white identity politics. That's all it is. They rather vote against their interests. They rather vote against healthcare for their own community just so black people don't get it. And that's literally what it is.
It's not voting against their interests. They just have multifarious interests. Like the wages of whiteness are real. They're not voting like that. I think that's a losing argument, because it's not true. It's not just not persuasive. I just don't think it's true. They get something out of it. Like they get the church they think they want. They get the family they think they want. They get the gender identity they think they want. And if we're actually serious about changing it, we, like Kareem suggested, you have to fight the total war. And I guess I'm a Maoist about these things, but like you have to fight the total war, and you're gonna have to change their ideology governing religion, family, gender, property, their relationship to education institutions. All of those entitlements are going to have to be reconformed in order to sustain the class politics that will support racial justice. And like yeah.
No, go ahead. Good.
No, I mean that's just a huge task, but I don't think there's another way. So like we need to start talking about like going after school boards, going after like media institutions and cultural institutions, because you gotta work, like I call it work in the body. If you're a boxer, you can't just get the headshot. That's not gonna work. And if you think the working class solidarity is a headshot, it's not. You gotta work the body, because like and like weaken the defenses, or your working class politics will be rejected in favor, not ignorantly, but in favor of meaning and all of these other aspects of their life.
That's why I'm in favor, and this is why I do what I do, is just massive education, because I keep telling people that right-wing populism doesn't exist. When people say I'm a right-wing what does that mean? What does that even mean? Being a right-wing populist, like, but go ahead.
I think it's a thing. Like in the South, there were right-wing populists like Huey Long and Big Jim, what's his name? It was great right up until it included black people. And I'm sure you could have the same thing the nationalists in Europe. Like you'll have like a populist who's a legit populist, as long as we don't include people from Turkey right?
I would love to actually learn more about that. 'Cause I don't know a ton about the history.
Well, I'm sure Kareem or Peter, you guys could talk about that.
What I mean by this is I'm talking about like the current movement. Like you may have a good point there, but the current movement, the people who call themselves right-wing populists, that doesn't exist. Let me.
Well, you know, if I can quickly jump in, Nick, I would say that right-wing populism, which literally means a popular working class movement that in favor of pro-capitalist racists. I think the only glue that keeps right-wing populism together is racism, and maybe some sexism, and because of course they will throw in sexism, but I think racism is more powerful. But it's almost a contradiction in terms. It's a popular working class movement in favor of right-wing capitalists, or in favor of pro-capitalist racists. I would say elites. It's in favor of pro-capitalist elites. You could say,
not directly. I think it's indirectly in favor.
A guy like Donald Trump, I would consider that a pro-capitalist racist elite. And if you see the mobilization among right-wing populists for a man like Donald Trump, you know what I mean? What is the glue that keeps them together? It's not the money. It's not the social welfare.
Man of people.
You also see it with Tucker. Tucker, who is supposed to be like the most famous right-wing populist, he literally runs segments where he defends harsh immigration policies that is human rights violations, and the argument he uses is literally protecting the demographics of the country. Like he said, we don't want the white genocide, and he's one of the people that, and this is why Republicans like him, because they're like, oh my God, Tucker says it how it is. No, I'm just saying he says the quiet part out loud. You just admitted it. You said the only reason you support this is because you want to keep a certain amount of the population white. You see, and these same people accuse us of pulling the race card. You see how their entire politics is based around white dominance. They support harsh immigration policy because they want to keep this country white. Tucker Carlson did a fucking segment where he said it. He literally said it. But go ahead.
But it's not just white dominance. It's white dominance that doesn't treat white working class people like garbage. Right? So like that's what makes it populist. If it was just white dominance, it'd be something else.
That. The only reason I would dispute that because I think Tucker and the right-wing elites, they are taking advantage of the right-wing culture warriors who honestly, they dumb and they fall for it and they vote for their own interest. And a lot of them are screwed because of that. So, and they get lost in the sauce. That's the only thing I will add to that, but I'll pass it right back to you.
But compared to blackness, it's still much better. I mean, check only the way you're treated by the police. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah, trust me, I'm black and I'm poor. Trust me, I get it. But I've been in the South. A lot of these poor white people, they're not living great lives either.
No,
but you can say that while at the same time admitting that shit, my life is fucked. Like the life expectancy that my grandparents had is 20 years lower than the white working class, right? So I know, trust me, I know. But my point is, and this is what makes it kind of sad, the fact that you have poor white people, they get so caught up in white identity politics and the cultural war.
It's meaningful. It's meaning. Like what else is? Why? Is
I think it hurts them though. I think it hurts them too. I see your argument and I see what you're saying, and I think there's truth to that. But I do think it hurts them because I think if they actually woke up and they asked like, all right, let's fight to get healthcare. Let's fight for I think it would help them in that way. I'm talking about the poorest of the white people. You're right when it comes to like the suburbanites. It helps them 100%. But if you look at the poorest of the poorest, they will be better off if they just drop the culture war shit. If they drop that and join coalition, it will help them. That is my opinion, but I'll pass it back to you.
I don't know if they'll be better off. I think what they consider better off is power in their community and power over black people and a sense of esteem that the nation is for them in particular. And they lose all of that for healthcare. I think they'd rather not live as long.
and to be fair to your argument, they make that calculation. Apparently, they make that calculation. They choose. They're like, I'd rather take the side of the culture war that help elevate.
I think I have a good example. Right. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, you know what, this is a great place for a small group of people to have a march on Washington. They would and all they have to do is threaten to breathe on people. And they would have like, and then I pitched this to Crystal Ball like in like March of like February. I was like, if we call for a march, it would only take like 10 of us, and we'd get like huge national coverage to call for a federal job guarantee, to call for like hazard pay, to call for all these things. And the idea that but then some people on the popular left were like, well, you can't, the march is only meaningless because it was at that time it would have been meaningful because like I was threatening to breathe on people. And at that time that was very scary. Right. So that would have actually been huge, right? And you know who figured that out first? The right. The right were like, if we break quarantine loudly, we get our message and we're willing to risk our lives and other people's lives in order to secure meaning in our lives. And sure, we might die of corona a little bit faster, but like we get to live the way of life to which like is meaningful to us. And to do that, we're going to have to risk that and go out and push for reopening or whatever, right? So like they actually figured out that meaning means more than health a little bit faster. I even wrote something about like I wrote something about this call of you know, if you go to my Medium page, you can find, I think I called it the Health Factory, where we were being commissioned. We should go on strike from the Health Factory because the enforced quarantine was actually conscription into labor that we weren't being compensated for. So we should go on a health strike and go out and threaten to breathe on people until the government secured us like wages to quarantine and like a job guarantee when we got back. So like that's what I was thinking of at the time. And but the right actually got that faster and went out and actually jeopardized health for the sake of meaning. And they got ahead of the debate. And I worry that they're going to do the same thing with the mask thing, because I'm not particularly keen on wearing masks for the rest of my life now that we have vaccines. And I don't want my kids wearing them either. And if the right figures out that that's an issue that like will actually win on, then that might work. I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about that. Meaning is more important than their lives. I mean, let's not forget that there are people who blow themselves up in the name of their race, or hundreds of thousands of soldiers dying in name of their nation and nationality or even race.
Are they confused about their interests?
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's weird to think then that would not be the case when they are voting for somebody on the right, for example, versus their own class interests. You know what I mean? If we ask ourselves, okay, but look how many people are willing to give their lives on the front line in the army, you know, out of racial motivations.
Are they, the question, the pushback from the left will be, well, they're confused about their interests. And Peter, I just don't think they're confused about their interests. I just think they're making a different calculation. It's not out of confusion. It's a different structure.
Right, but the concept of false consciousness, as I understand it, is it's basically the speaker is taking a position and saying, I am objectively right about their real interests. Like their real interests are having more power in the workplace, being able to determine the conditions of your work, the remuneration for your work, etc. And since that's the real interest, their imagined interests that they think are more important, they're just wrong about that. And most of the time, that their way of thinking has been shaped by the ruling class to think in precisely those ways. Like, you know,
I find that to be a condescending view, but that's a good rehearsal of the view.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, and that's why I brought up at the beginning. I get the reaction from liberals, like whenever they hear the idea of false consciousness, and I'm like, dude, you think exactly the same way, but on different topics, because they think they are objectively correct on, you know, feminism or racism or what have you, and then they can say, well, these people are objectively mistaken. And I'm like, okay, that's the exact same, you know, condescending attitude. And it's fine. I mean, in a way it is condescending, but like we all do that. Like find me anyone that doesn't actually do the exact same thing, where they believe that they're right. And if someone has a different opinion, well, that other person is just wrong.
That's why we have arguments and debates and think about that. I mean, like I said, I get a lot of this about gender because people say like, why are these women voting against their interests? Why are these white women voting against their interests? I'm like, we need to be honest. Like, we just misunderstand how this works. like they want their husband to make a whole dollar and stay at home. Like they're not voting against their interests. Like the biggest low-key pushback against Me Too was women who wanted to try to sleep with the boss. Like that was like, we need to be honest about how this works. The Me Too wasn't the thing with real estate agents, because real estate agents want their clients to like flirt with them and buy a big house.
Yeah.
So we misunderstand interests, and we misunderstand power and meaning and lots of people's life. Hey, I got to scoot.
Yeah, we can wrap up. An hour is good. So I want to give you an opportunity to give to plug anything you want to. I'm sorry, I'll keep messing your name up. Irami. Sorry, I apologize. Irami. I want to give you this last chance to plug anything you want to say, or give you the last thought.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com. Check out some of my videos. I shot one on Tuesday about how Nancy Pelosi, the way we've organized congressional seats, she's actually harder to get rid of than Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. Like the GOP had a problem for them, had a solution for them. But Pelosi, like, we don't know. She doesn't take debates. She just kind of keeps winning. Like she doesn't, no mutant. Like she only talks to friendly media. She doesn't sit down for debates, and we have no like plan. We can't get rid of her. So like she's got more security than like I said, Hussein and Gaddafi. And so what does that mean? That we've structured this democracy in this way that like they don't have to actually debate issues. And so like I do videos like that. I'm doing one later on this afternoon. It'll be on some stuff that we kind of talked about today. So go to the site and give some money, and I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. That's such a great point. I remember when during the Georgia Senate race, when Ossoff went against Perdue, the liberal class lost their mind when Perdue declined a rematch against Ossoff. They were saying, "Oh my God, you're against democracy." But I agree. I think he should debate him again. But Perdue debated Ossoff before. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi refused to debate Shahid. Where was the reaction to that?
Decades. She hasn't sat for a debate since 1987. She refuses. She just says no. Like, how do you like? This is the deliberative democracy. How can you just say no? I refuse to debate any challengers. Like, how is that attainable? There should be a constitutional amendment, because without that, then party elites just become a faction against the electorate because they control all the information. So like there should be a constitutional amendment that should trigger an automatic process that like candidates have to sit for like a contested debate against people who challenge. It's ridiculous. She can have complete control of the media and refuse to debate like publicly debate any challenges for decades, and that's not like a problem for our democracy.
That's a good point. Make sure you guys check out that video. I'm gonna check it out. That's such a good premise. But
and I want to advise one more video from Irami, and that is I think it was titled. It's already an older video. I think it's entitled "Why I'm Not a Feminist." I'm not sure, but I think it's and it's a very thought-provoking and good video. And I hope someday in the future we can discuss this a bit back and forth, because like I said, he's unapologetic, but he comes with very, very strong points with different and often unorthodox views on the left, but very much worth it. So to the listeners here, I think you should definitely look that video up.
And what do you guys got going on at BetBeat? Make sure you guys got to subscribe, man. BetBeat, it makes great content. Any last words for you guys, Kareem and Peter?
That hour went by ridiculously fast. I love doing these things at night when my brain is awake. I was hoping to, I mean, I guess we can do this in some future time, but like what Irami was saying about like what the task is, like changing people's minds, getting them to, basically like changing their whole ideology is precisely it. Like the question is like, how do we do it? And it just reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes. I was in Shaoshan visiting the Mao museum, and there's this Mao quote where he's like, if we're trying to cross the river, we can't cross it without a bridge or a boat. Unless we solve the bridge or boat problem, it's idle to speak of crossing the river. And unless the problem of method is solved, talk about the task is useless. And so like I would hope that we could get into a conversation next time about like how exactly we do that task of, you know, reshaping people's minds. Like
I gotta go, but thank you. This was great, and I will see you. Invite me again, and I'll come back.
Yeah, right? We're gonna be doing this on Thursday. Thank you for joining us. We also had the roundtable later today as well. So make sure you guys hit the bell and subscribe. And if you guys are new viewers, then check out BetBeat as well. Thank you for checking us out. The Social Cinema and the BetBeat crew.